Everyone is vulnerable to being pinned when life plays hardball, whether it is a physical or mental health condition. No one can stand alone. For those who are not pinned, appreciate that it could be you or loved one someday. So when you see a chance to help someone, please do. They are not weak, they are pinned. Even a slight hand up and a listening ear can begin seriously lightening the load, change, or save a life. Help end stigma. Move from being pinned to purpose. Time for a hand up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Moore. I'm the founder of the Pin to Purpose podcast, and I'm very pleased today to welcome our guest from Florida, Gary Roberts, who, among many hats, is the founder of Neurovus and also is a former Montrealer, where I'm from. So very happy about that connection too. We're also both ambassadors with the Real Mental Health Foundation. So it's great to have Gary on. Before I begin, I'd just like to say, for people who maybe haven't seen this podcast before, the goal of Pin to Purpose is to help to shatter stigma, to have open conversations about mental health and well-being, and then to help give people a hand up on their healing journeys, based on hearing the stories of people such as Gary and the important work that he's doing, and how, we're all human and everybody has a breaking point, and hopefully we can help each other to avoid that and support each other in the more difficult times. So before passing it over to Gary, I'd just like to read a bit of his bio just to give some initial background. And so I'll just begin. So I'm Gary Roberts, a 20-year firefighter and founder of Neurovus. Most systems wait for the breakdown. We built one that doesn't. My path here started with personal loss. After losing my daughter to the opioid crisis, I stopped waiting for systems to catch up to the people falling through their gaps, and I started building. What I kept seeing in firehouses, in families, and in organizations wasn't a mental health problem. It was an awareness problem. Capable people operating past their limits, leaders making decisions while dysregulated, teams losing cohesion before anyone names it. The signals were always there. Nobody was reading them. That's the gap Neurovus was built to close. And so Neurovus is an AI-powered human awareness platform that detects early signals before burnout, before crises, before the decisions that shouldn't have to be made. And I just read that off of LinkedIn, Gary's profile, because I think it's a good introduction, telling a bit of the background. But we're going to get into much more detail on why he built that, his story. And he's also, somebody who wears many hats, is doing many things, and has a long-standing podcast as well, which a top-rated podcast called Good Dudes Grow. So it would have been good for me to talk to him a bit more, as I'm more of a rookie in the podcast circles, but he's been doing it for a while. So, but Gary, fantastic to have you here. I'll pass it over to you if you want to say some of your own words of introduction.
Sure, Jeff, it's a pleasure. Thank you. Another Montrealer, too bad the Montreal Canadiens didn't go as far as they were supposed to go, but they still have a good team, and it's still young. They still got some opportunities, but I'm happy to be on your podcast. Like you said, I wear many hats. I've got into the mental health industry about 6 to 7 years ago when my daughter passed away, as you mentioned, on her
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Exactly on her 27th birthday. And it was rough because, it hurt my whole family. They didn't understand what was going on. I was about 15 years in the fire department. I dealt with death and trauma, and one of the areas I worked in was very heavily impacted by overdoses. So I knew what was going to go on. I knew what was happening, and I was the one that actually had to explain it to my wife and everybody else what was happening. So it was very difficult for us to understand, because unfortunately the doctors are not going to call your loved one and call them that they've passed away. They're just going to keep saying that they're living until you make that decision. Unfortunately, we had to make the decision to remove her off life support because there was no continuing. So, but yeah, 20-year veteran firefighter. I've seen it all. I've seen things that many people will never see in their life. I've seen things that people kind of see on TV, kind of see in movies, but it doesn't portray the exact stuff that we see. And I started noticing, not only from what happened to my daughter, but I started noticing there was an issue with addiction facilities, the way they were actually working with people, how they were working with people, and how it's more not just an addiction thing. There's also a mental factor involved. So I did about a year after that of her passing, I did a bunch of research. But the whole project started with my daughter. I'll be honest. It was her idea. She went in and out of rehab. She knew she had a problem. She came to us. She was open about it. She got involved with opiates from a car accident. And then she went down to the path that once the opiates stopped, she went down the bad path. But she knew she had a problem. She was a healthy individual. She was a smart individual. But she was also an individual that cared about a lot of other people. So it impacted her mentally, because she started seeing her friends passing away, started seeing that, and so it kind of fell on her, and I think that also drove her into the substance abuse. And I started realizing that substance abuse and mental health kind of had a very big relationship, and I started investigating that. And then as I was investigating that, the year after, I lost two fellow firefighters to suicide.
So sorry about that too. Yeah.
And I started realizing there's something that's going on that nobody's looking at. I'm looking at this research. I see this paperwork. I see, the government and researchers, NIH, everybody's done $50 billion in research. They all have this stuff on paper saying, okay, we can do this. We can save things, kind of like certain, cancer stuff. We have the capabilities, but nobody's doing anything. It's wonderful to read about it. You're like, oh yeah, we got something, but nobody was doing anything to put it in a practical sense. And we started, and this was pre-COVID. And when we started, we said, let's do something different. Let's create a facility that we can build, that we can not only treat people, but we can use the facility as a research center, that we can actually create the proper protocols to put those studies that we read into practical sense. So we were looking actually to do that. We started raising some capital. We were looking actually to do it out in Costa Rica, because the Costa Rica and the US government, the FDA, they're kind of on the same level, but the cost is a third of the cost. So he says, okay, well, let's build one in Latin America and to use those protocols and bring it to the United States. We raised a bunch of capital, and then COVID came in and kind of destroyed all of that. And it was a vision for our daughter. Me and my wife says, we need to build something that continues her legacy of continuously helping people. And the reason why I say that is we found out that she was an organ donor without knowing. And that she ended up on her passing, she also ended up saving somebody else's life that we actually ended up still staying in contact with to this day.
That's fine.
And that was the person she was. So we said, so we can build a legacy to where our facility with her legacy can keep giving. That's what we wanted to do. And then when COVID came in and kind of wiped us out, we were devastated. It hurt us financially. It was something that we really, really worked hard on. We had hospitals involved. We have international partners. Everything was going. And when you get all that taken out from underneath you, it's kind of like, it's almost like losing your daughter again. It's like, do we just give up? Do we, what do we do? And my wife, and the whole thing was actually built on a technological platform. I'm kind of like a technical guy. I do a lot of research. Do a lot of AI, do a lot of computer stuff. I do a lot of stuff. So it was all built on a technological platform. And my wife said, do you ever look in building an app? And I went, I don't want to build a mental health app. Everybody's building apps. There's, thousands of apps for mental health and everything else. She goes, well, build something that's actually not going to be an app, but build something that can actually show what's going on. And I said, okay, let me see what's going on. And I started investigating what's happening with technologies. It was a couple of years. There was a year or so after COVID. And that's when the wearable market was starting to boom. I was in the wearable market prior to COVID. It helped me through COVID. It made me understand my body while I was in COVID. Listen, my fire department was the ground zero for COVID. The nursing home that started COVID was in my district, in my area. We were the first people to run on the COVID patients in that facility. So we got hit with it, and we all caught it. And so what the wearable did is started teaching me what my body was dealing with as I was struggling with it, the tiredness, the lethargicness, the no energy, the everything. And so I started using the wearable to kind of, rebuild myself. When I say rebuild, I'm a fitness guy. I've been in the gym since I was 12. I was a competitive CrossFit athlete. I still work out to this day my whole thing is, if I don't work out, I can't do my job. If I can't pull somebody out of a burning building, there's no use me being a firefighter, period. And so I used it to do that. And I started researching wearables, and I started looking more into it. And I started realizing everybody's using them now to count their steps, count their, their fitness levels, count this, count that, but nobody really understands it. They just go with what it says. What's it doing? And if you know right now, if you see right now, and you follow the wearable industry right now, they're all going medical. They're all connecting to your health records. They're all connecting to blood work. So they're becoming like a preventative doctor before you see your doctor type thing. And I says, well, if it's doing that, there's got to be something that shows in studies that shows a mental health aspect to it, as well as a physical health aspect, because it's grabbing the physiology underneath you. And that's where I did some research, found some studies, and that was what was happening. The studies actually start showing the stress load, the HRV, and everything that's going on the average individual. And that's why I says, you know what? I think we got something here. Let me put my little technology and the stuff that's in my brain that I want together, and let me go out and reach some people and see, hey, what do you think? Can this be quantifiable? And that's where I slowly started my journey on that aspect of it.
Amazing. I want to go backwards for a second, and maybe this is your project in Costa Rica, because I was reading about that you're the CEO and co-founder of Promises Recovery Inc. and Promises Sanctuary. And is that the Costa Rica project, or is that something else as well?
That's the Costa Rica project, and the Promises Sanctuary is actually the nonprofit my daughter decided to help do it, because her thing was, when she was going through the rehabs, Florida, I don't know if a lot of people understand, but Florida was going through a huge patient brokering issue. Basically, the rehabs out there would get the people better. They would put in some homes, and then they would actually get the people stuck again, and so they would go back to rehab. So it was a huge patient brokering. Florida actually put a law and says they can't do it anymore. What was happening is they were calling people, and they were drawing people from other states, Canada, everything else. Hey, listen, you want to go to rehab? What better place to go to rehab than South Florida and the palm trees and beauty? But once their insurance ran out, to the streets they go, and people like us were picking them up constantly. And so we decided, like, what if we built something on a nonprofit style to where, the nonprofits paid for their care. These guys can no longer bill these insurance companies who are actually there to get the people help. And that was the essential idea. And that's where we came up with the idea, well, let's build our own. But yes, let's also use it as a clinical research facility.
Right. Okay. And I also want to go into, your background as a firefighter, and maybe it helps to explain for some of the audience who aren't firefighters, who maybe can imagine but not really know what it's like the different things you're exposed to, as you said, the traumas that are part of your job, and how typically firefighters would be coping either on their own, or if there are specific programs, or just to understand, that type of profession.
Let me see. I'm going to try to be not too graphic or graphic.
No,
but right. I want everybody to understand what first responders and firefighters go through, so they can get a visual of what we deal with. I usually go with the aspect of, let's go with the movies. Everybody knows what war is because they've seen movies like Platoon and stuff like that. They know that when you go to war, it's going to be death and mayhem, body parts, and all that type of thing. They've seen it on TV and in the movies. Every movie out there for a first responder or a firefighter, it doesn't show the reality. It shows, you can go to Ladder 42, you see these guys, talking in a massive burning warehouse. Let's be honest, within 7 minutes in a just a simple room like the one behind me, when it fully evolves, it's 1,200 degrees. I don't know if you've actually cooked anything in your oven and you accidentally opened it and you went to reach in too fast, and that heat just gets you.
Yes.
That's only 350, 400. Now, times that by 3. A lot of things are happening. There's skin melting. There's stuff going on. You're not surviving that. You're not talking. You're not. It's not portrayed on TVs. You see them running out with a person. Listen, when you're pulling a person out of a building when it's 1,200, 2,000 degrees in, you're pulling on them, but their skin is just ripping off them, and it stays on you. The smell stays on you. The burnt hair stays on you. That stays with you in your nose for a 24-hour shift. And that's just one call maybe that you're running. And the next call may be a baby in a pool that you're pulling out where the parents are yelling at you and it's a limp child. And then the next call may be somebody's grandmother that was T-boned by somebody that you're trying to pull out. It's constantly every day that you see that 24 hours a day. And we do this from day one when we get hired, every third or fourth day, depending on your shift, for 30 years. We are guaranteed, as soon as we sign on our little appointment and go on shift that day, to see something terrible. Not like if you go to the army or go to something else, and if there's no wars, chance of you seeing something terrible are not not going to happen. And that's why a lot of times a lot of people ask me, why'd you go after first responders? I said, well, I'm not going after first responders. I'm going after those who serve, because for every veteran that leaves the service, they end up becoming a police officer or a firefighter. So if they don't see trauma in the service, they're going to see it in their career. If they did see trauma in their service, it's going to double and triple impact in their career. I've talked to everybody. If you, like you said, you've seen my podcast. I've talked to Sean Ryan from the Sean Ryan Show. He says the same thing. He goes, "You've seen more in your 15 years than I've seen, in battle." That's what we deal with. The only difference is in battle, they have a 9-month delay before they see their family. We have a half hour. So that compartmentalization is instantaneous. We instantaneously learn how to shut things off. And our mentality always goes to, something's going to go wrong. How can I fix it? And that is our mentality, no matter what. And that breeds constantly for 10, 15, 20 years. And that brings it to home. So if there's an issue with your wife, you're going, there's something wrong. Something's going to go bad. How do I fix it? And that's where a lot of divorces and why the divorce rate's up there. So being a first responder, we see basically, if not more, but double the stuff that a lot of military aspects see. And then I feel bad for the military that did see that and come into our profession, because they're going to consistently see it for the next 20, 30 years.
Thanks for sharing that. Maybe I can ask you then about the evolution so far of Neurovus, from when you started it and how it's been going, how it's been received, the continued work you're doing to make sure it's as impactful as possible. Just, if you want to tell more of the story of the evolution, and then obviously our listeners here, at the end of this, there'll be a link to the Neurovus website, and anybody who's interested in learning even more can reach out to you. But I just want you to tell us more about the evolution as you've been building it the last few years and where it's at now.
Definitely. So like I said, we did some studies, we did some research. We started seeing that the passive collection of physiological data on a wearable, whether it's a wrist wearable, whether it's a ring, whether it's a watch, shows how first responders respond to that trauma, not only at work, but while they're at home and what goes on. So it consistently collects passively data. And the research shows that if there's a certain pattern, well, that pattern slowly leads to depression. Depression slowly leads to substance abuse. Then it keeps going down to a road to where they become close to a cliff. And when they get that cliff and they want to jump, that's where they're all screaming, "I need help." And the problem at that point is, if we don't give them help, they jump. If we give them the wrong help, they jump. How can we get them not to that cliff? And that's what we've been struggling with to try and figure out. And we've actually realized that it's not just a physiological thing. It's an awareness thing. Every day that we go on shift, there's a small piece of our soul that's taken. That physiology is taken away from us. We don't feel it. The first 5 years, we feel wonderful. The next 5 years, we feel a little bit angry, less wanting to be around people. After 10 years, we start isolating a little bit everything we talk about. We end up going home and we just want peace. We want quiet. We don't want to discuss anything. Every time the wife goes or your spouse goes, how was your day? It's fine. It's not like our job is not to tell them what we went through. Our job is to protect everybody. And that starts building up. What we did with Neurovus is we took AI's ability to gather those patterns and detect those patterns through the wearables. Not only through the wearables, but I wanted to incorporate something. As a first responder, I'll be telling you, type A personality, I don't like talking, which is kind of weird because I have my own podcast. So talking was an issue starting to get forward, but the podcast helped me. It was like my own therapist. So it helped me talk about what I was going through. So that was the cool thing about the podcast, especially with the guests that I had on. But most first responders are not going to talk. We don't want to go to therapy. We're not going to talk. The only time we're going to therapy is if we're threatened with our job. Then we'll go there and then we'll sit and we'll go through the motions just to get out of therapy to get back to our job. That's it. And I said,
can I stop you for a second? Why do you think that is? Or is there a broad statement as to why that is? Or it's a very individual thing? Is it pride? Is it like, the old school stiff upper lip, toughness? Is it the feeling you'd be or what do you, how do you see that?
It's the stigma that we don't want to be seen as weak. Like you said, it's the toughness. And we don't want our department to know that we're doing anything. We're going through this, because then they're going to think we can't do our job. Then we're fearful that our job is at risk. On my podcast, I talked to a couple of firefighters that had to leave early from their department, and their department fought them on their mental health benefits. That's why we don't want to say we're having a mental health crisis, because we don't know if our benefits will continue, if our department will back us, what's going to happen. They're so stigmatized. And even right now, we're still trying to figure out the data. And we're having a battle between the old salty guys that have been doing it for 20 years going, yeah, we've been doing it for 20 years. We've never had this problem. That's great. I understand that. But 20 years ago, you weren't running 15 to 20 calls a day. Now, with the massive increase in population, the increase in calls, the shortage of firefighters, these guys are running more calls than the old guys. I understand the old guys didn't have it, and I'm not saying that they did anything less, but the amount of impact the new guys and guys like us that are seeing is huge. I mean, we're seeing twice as much, 3 times as much than these guys ever saw. And we're trying to battle. Now they're all chiefs and administrators. So we're trying to battle this and trying to explain to them, hey, this is what's going on. And so that's one of the biggest things in the stigmas about it. And that's one of the hardest things we're trying to get. And that's the trust factor that most police officers and fire departments have, is that if you're going to do all this stuff and, get our physiological data and show that this and that, is my healthcare going to get it so that my healthcare goes up? Is my department going to get it so that they think that I can't do my job anymore? What's going to happen? And that's one of the biggest things we were actually afraid of, and we wanted to overcome, and that's what we overcome. But yeah, it's the stigma in the departments, and it's the machoism of, suck it up, buttercup. That's how we were taught. You sign up for this job, you know what you were going to see, kind of thing.
Right. It's fascinating, because at the core of the metaphor that I have on Pin to Purpose, my own doctor had said, look, everybody in the world has a breaking point. People don't always hit them, but it depends on what happens to you. Anybody can, right? And so the bench press analogy, and I know you've been training since you were 12, and you continue to train very seriously. It's a bit of a joke, because I'm talking about a bar, 45 pounds with no plates. But the thing is, the only way to do this exercise to completion is you do it until you can't budget an inch off your chest anymore, and then you've broken. And we're all the same. I had a guy who was named the strongest man in the world on my podcast this was back in 2002 when he won this title. But it's the same. Nobody's superhuman. So depending on, without a spot, without a break in between, all of these different things, to me, it ties into all of these different stories, like you're saying. But it's just one example, right? Because it's trying to show that, that it's not a matter about being weak, but it is a matter about being in a weakened state when you're at the point of exhaustion and overwhelm, and just, and you guys deal with seriously intense things. So that's why I created it. It's a starting point for discussion, but it does work every time in terms of a demonstration, in terms of an actual experiential thing, because nobody, you can be the strongest NFL lineman, you're going to eventually get pinned, and then you could have your 5-year-old help you lift it up. And if you take a little break, of course you recover, but then the circumstances are the same. You do it again, you're going to, eventually it can rip your shoulder, even if you're like a super strong man or woman. So that's kind of the starting point of the discussion, and trying to go after, the perception of weakness and all of this, depending on what's happening. But
yeah, exactly. But imagine this. So imagine your analogy, but then you put it in a fire department context. You're still battling that stigma with words. You don't have data. You don't have, it's happening, because people are saying it's happening, but you're trying to explain to these people that don't believe it's there, that it's happening.
Sure.
And that's what we were running into. That's what EAP was running into. That's what therapists were running into. I have a story of somebody that, you go see a therapist that have no idea what we do. And then we tell them the stories we see. And then the therapist started crying. Well, if the therapist is crying after my story I told you, then there's something wrong with me. It blows my mind and that's the battle we were having.
Right.
What we did is we created the understanding that we could show you physiological data
Yeah.
underlying, showing that what we're saying and what has been studied is true now. So now
Yeah.
what we're talking about, we have technology that can show it.
Yeah.
And that's basically what we built.
And no, I think it's fantastic. I mean, again, just to put what I'm doing in context, for me, I'm trying to give people a tiny hand up to get to that, to get to people such as yourself and others who have data, who have, because I'm just trying to make a factual point that allows for openness, for further dialogue and consideration of circumstances, looking at data and seeing if that allows people to have a little bit of a hand up, so that they're not afraid of losing their job, or the cultures could change in different places. They're not afraid of losing their insurance. They're just human, but they've gotten into a point where, yes, they're close to or hitting a breaking point. Then I think that's the whole goal of what I'm doing. I'm not saying anything stops there. Of course not. It's
Right.
just one way to shatter stigma and start taking that weight off of people a bit, and then get into a broader, go after it, right?
Exactly, 100%. And I talked to another firefighter the other day that we just brought on as our outreach, and he nailed it perfectly. He goes, first responders are the number one best bullshit detectors. And I apologize for saying that, is that we don't trust anybody. And you had better come with something to change our minds, because we're still not going to believe anything you say. And even though we're gathering data, I said, okay, I'm going to gather data. Nobody believed me. I was still being roadblocked by my own community, saying, what are you talking about? And so what we did is that, okay, let's figure out how we can beat this roadblock. So what we did with our platform is we created an AI conversational tool that acts like a firefighter. A couple of my posts, if you look on my Instagram, you'll see I says, the world's problems can be solved around a kitchen table of a firehouse. I'm telling you what, we could solve cancer at there is so much knowledge that doesn't make any sense, but we'll solve something at the kitchen table. And that's what we call our own conversational piece. Well, I built our kitchen table inside my app, so that when these people feel that there's nobody to talk to, and they're afraid to talk to somebody else,
right? Very good. Very good.
They can have a conversation with the app. And when the app's having that conversation, it's analyzing the conversation, it's analyzing their vagal tone, and it's also analyzing the biometrics underneath on their wearable that they're wearing. And when the AI sees trends in all three going into a bad direction, it actually slowly helps the individual say, hey, you know what? Something's going on because your sleep's off, this off, you're talking kind of like this. Maybe we should now reach out to a human individual. So we made our AI non-diagnostic, non-treatment wise, but what it does when it analyzes issues, it says, hey, listen, maybe we should get to our peer people. Maybe we should reach out and talk to that human connection. And that's the point that I told everybody else. That's the point where we just stopped them from getting anywhere close to that cliff.
Very good.
And that changed the entry to the departments. We don't collect your data. It's just a conversational tool that you have. You can talk to it. You can say anything to it. You can crack a joke with it. It'll laugh with you. I asked it who was going to win the World Cup, and then it laughed and says, it's not my lane, but you tell me who you think is going to win it, and it makes them feel at ease. And like I says, once we start talking, we start opening up. And if we're not going to open up
very good.
Right now in technology, if we don't open up personally, we will open up to technology, because we're all talking to ChatGPT and everything else. I just made an AI that's more for us, so it understands what our lives and what our careers are going through.
No, it's great. And I guess it's very reassuring to people too, that you're not collecting and saving the data, because then they can feel that they can be open about it, as opposed to, sharing intimate things that they don't necessarily want you or anyone else to be keeping as a recording, or, the people that they reach out to, how does that work? Is there a recommendation either through your organization, or of the types of people that they might trust most, or how does that work?
Usually it's the peer. It's either a peer support group. We're working. One of our researchers actually has that works in the fire department right now. They're embedded with they're called a behavioral health management service. So they're not technicians. They're not therapists. They are pre-therapy, technician type people, but they're embedded in the fire department to where they're always there if you want to talk, and they know what we do. They ended up going they work with one fire department. They end up going to some of the calls. They end up being at the hospitals. They have their own radios. They understand. They just show up and they just stay there and don't say a word. And if somebody walks by and wants to talk, then the conversation started. And then those people actually start checking out and saying, okay, maybe you should go see a therapist. Maybe there is a treatment that we can. And then after that, it's slowly projected to our network of different, and I like to use alternative therapy. So it's not just talk therapy. Talk therapy is great, but it's not the main thing. We actually have partners in everything from ketamine clinics to TMS facilities that use electronics throughout the brain. If you want to go way out in left field, if you go to my podcast, you want to go to psychedelic facilities, we have the ones that are actually been known to actually work, that are protected. We have connection to one of the first psychedelic research facilities in South Florida on the East Coast. So we could send you to there if you want. Everything's actually doctor approved. We just don't send you anywhere we want. And that's one of the biggest things. We want to get what I said in the beginning, that $50 billion in data that shows stuff works. We found credible participants that actually do those, from everything from EMDR to psychedelics to oxygen therapy. We found the individuals that actually do that, and it's proven to work by research. And we're actually giving the firefighters and first responders the opportunity to know that these treatments are actually available, not just talk therapy. This way our toolbox is much bigger and we have much more choices.
That's fantastic. And when you say the other first responders, are there, I guess they may have slightly different needs, but not really. It just depends on, they're going through similar things. If that includes police officers, I guess, and others. Yeah.
Yeah. So we work with firefighters, police officers, nurses, clinicians. That's our mainstay right now. One of the cool things, we started our pilot program. That's what everybody knows. We're gathering participants for our pilot program. And we didn't go out and get these people. We just says, hey, listen, here's our project. Here's what we're doing. And we're starting a pilot program. And if you want to join that pilot program, just sign up and we'll keep you informed once we start rolling out. I've got participants, up to about 50 participants, that self-signed up for this pilot program from across the nation. Now, if that's not a sign that these individuals want something different,
yeah,
then I don't know what is. I'm in talks with 2 fire departments, including my own, that says this is absolutely incredible. And now we're really starting to get traction. And that's the biggest thing that our project's doing right now, is that type of traction. It shows the validation that we're looking for something different than the usual. Let's get to these guys after something happens and let's hope EAP or peer support fixes it. No, these guys want to know before they get to that if something's going on, I have an option to do something so I can get away from that cliff and never get close to it, so I can enjoy my family, enjoy my career, and even enjoy my retirement. One of the biggest things in the first responder communities is retirement. You're removed from a secondary family and then you're cut off. That loss of purpose and teamwork really starts driving people in depression. And that's why a lot of first responders don't last longer than 5 years.
And how do you feel about the perception of stigma over the last 5 years? And I guess it's a very broad comment because we're all in different regions, different communities and things like that. But are you encouraged overall that there are more conversations, that there is more awareness? As you say, it's different times. There's more overwhelming circumstances for many people. Or what is your broad view on kind of the gradual elimination of stigma?
I'm excited because people are talking about it more. My biggest issue, and I'll be honest with you, talk's cheap. Listen, yeah. I've talked to thousands of foundations, thousands of nonprofits. Everybody's going after the same dollar, the same volunteer, the same. That's wonderful. But if this community doesn't start working together, then we're just talking about it again. We're doing another $50 billion research on paper, not doing anything. Mm-hmm. We need to start applying what we're saying to the communities. We need to jump in. We need to start helping each other out. We need to start, taking chances or shots on projects like ours to make a difference. Because if we don't, then we're just going to spend another, 25 years talking about it, and it's not going to go anywhere. That's great. We're talking about it. Great. It's an open subject now. Great. What are we doing about it to change it? That's the conversation we need to have. What is it we're doing about to change it? There's a lot of people, impact funds. They're all saying, "Oh yeah, we want to help everybody. You know, we got funds. We can," but yet they're not talking to anybody. They just want to be part of the conversation to show that they're doing something. And that's where there's a lot of how can you call it, impersonator mental health individuals. You know, a lot of people talk about impersonator syndrome. Well, there's a lot of people in the mental health industry that are impersonating that they actually want to do good, but don't do good. They're just talking about it. And that's what we got to be careful of. I don't want to continuously do a conversation. I want the conversation to lead in something practical.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I wanted to go on to one other thing just quickly, because again, you do wear many hats and you're involved in many things. And I was speaking to you briefly before the podcast because I found it quite interesting. I was reading about that you're a remote pilot and commander. And I didn't know what the UAS stood for, I guess, but is that, maybe you can tell our audience a bit more, as this is another one of the many hats that you wear and the different activities you're involved in.
Sure. Yeah. So being one of the technology guys, I'm on a hazardous materials team. So basically, like we were talking before, we do everything that nobody wants to touch. So firefighters don't want to touch it. Police officers don't want to touch it. Bomb squads kind of want to touch it, but they want to make sure we're there. We do everything that if accidentally happens, you'll glow in the dark. Basically, dirty bombs, nuclear attacks, all that stuff that you see that everybody's afraid of. We deal with that. And one of the biggest things is we're trying to protect our people from these incidents is better. So what we started doing is building a drone program, which a UAS is an unmanned aircraft support system, basically a pilot of the unmanned craft. So I'm actually the coordinator for our fire department for all our drones that actually work on all calls. So basically these drones will actually go up on incidents of tanker rollovers on a highway. I went to a couple of months ago, I actually went to a fully involved fire where I actually told the firefighter exactly where the fire was, where the hot spots were, so that they weren't walking around the house in an endangered environment where a roof could collapse on them. I told them where it was. The drone basically has an AI of itself that has its own brain, it has infrared thermal. It'll fly anywhere I want it to fly. And basically that's how we're actually protecting our guys from unburdened burnout, as well as dangerous situations that they cannot see. So basically now they have an eye in the sky watching over them every time they go into these major emergency calls.
Wow, fascinating. I saw recently here in Montreal, there was some window washing done by drones, like on the 10th stories of buildings and things. I hadn't seen that personally before. And I presume that drones obviously can fly high up in a skyscraper and be helpful in terms of putting out fires in certain cases.
They go anywhere between 400 to 700 feet up in the air as far as they can go. It's like, so our drone basically is also, it's has its own Wi-Fi connection to it, so it can actually fly about 4 miles out, and I can bring it as far as I can and still bring it back to where we can actually see what's going on. The cool thing about it is, like on high rises, we don't have to go up with all our gear. Most of our gear weighs, I weigh about 180 pounds. I got another 200 pounds of gear that I have to put on to go up.
Wow.
Up in a high rise. Well, that's a lot of undue stress and possible danger to the firefighter. So what we do now is we throw the drone up, and we actually let the drone go up and see what's going on, so we can actually slow down the response time so there's no accidents on the roads, and maybe slow them down from putting all this gear on and saying, it's a false alarm, there's nothing in there, everything looks good, we just need to go up and verify it.
Well, yeah, I didn't realize that you'd be carrying that much weight. That's that's very serious. So a couple more things, and then I want to also invite you if there's anything else you wanted to say as we wrap up in the next few minutes. But for any of our viewers right now who might be struggling with their own challenges and things, you've gone through many things. You have the company that's helping people, etc. I don't know if you have any general comments for them. That the whole podcast, we all learn from each guest, and guests have had their own lived experiences or families or different things, and we're trying to give people a hand up. But if there's any broad general comments that you might have for people who could be struggling now, and also pointing them towards your own Neurovus as well, for when it's specifically to do with first responders.
Yeah, definitely. Everybody says, if you're going through something, reach out. Do it. the good thing about reaching out is not only that will you actually reach out to somebody and start talking about the issues you may be having, you may actually have helped somebody else open up about the issues they're having. So that human connection is needed right now in society with everybody on their phones. You can see it now when people go out to dinner, everybody's looking at their phones. There's a lack of a human connection. Don't lose that human connection. Even though we're building an AI technology platform, the AI technology is built to entice people to reach out to that human connection. It's not made there to actually be replacement to those therapists or replacement. So your AI, your TikTok, your chat GPT is not going to replace that human connection. Those AIs are always made to make you feel good, and they may not give you the right information, but you need to understand what you're saying, and you need somebody to actually be there with you, that they can see your expressions and everything else. And that human contact is what's missing a lot. We talked about the facility we were looking at building out in Costa Rica. One of the biggest things, there's 7 blue zones where people live forever. And they studied those 7 blue zones. It was actually on TV, and they studied those 7 blue zones. And there was 3 main things that each one of those blue zones that the longevity forever worked. It was basically keep moving, eat well, and human connection. If we lose that human connection to technology, then we're going to have a big, big issue. That's where a lot of people are talking to about the AI junk trunk. They're talking to you, saying it's going to create a mass issue. So if you're having a problem, the human connection will be a lot easier to get to than actually an AI connection.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Gary. And in terms of reaching out to you, is the best way, I guess, that they go to the Neurovus website and then they can connect with you if they want to learn more, or what do you recommend to viewers? What is best for you for people who are interested in learning more?
Yeah, first, if you're a first responder or somebody, or a first responder, police officer, nurse, or veteran that's in that community, and you want to help build a foundational aspect of this, you're not joining a pilot program just so we can gather your data. You're being a foundation to actually building this app to make it the best it can be for your brothers and sisters that are out there. So go to neurovus.com, join our pilot program, sign up. The good thing about that is once we get the data that we're looking for, this program will be available to everybody else. So if you want to reach out and see where we are and what's going on, we have an investor tab, we have a pilot program tab. Just go to neurovus.com. All our links are there. Reach out anytime you're curious. If you think you can help with the project and you have something that's interesting, we're always looking to talk with collaborators and how we can actually help people. Again, my goal was never just to talk about it. My goal was actually take what everybody's talking about, what everybody's research, and put it in a practical sense. So if there's some way you can help with that, reach out.
That's fantastic. Well, Gary, thanks so much for being our guest today on the Pen to Purpose podcast. Congratulations on all you're doing, and much success, and look forward to seeing you sometime in person and having a Molson X or something like that.
Definitely, Jeff. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much.